Imagine boarding a flight before dawn, excitement for your next big opportunity dancing in your mind. You settle into seat 1C in first class, ready to review your notes, only to hear a voice cut through the cabin. Hum, "You don't belong here." A black CEO with a confirmed first-class ticket is told to move. No apology, no explanation. Just a cold insistence that his presence is a mistake. What would you do in that moment of shock and humiliation? How far would you go to prove a simple truth that you paid for your seat and you deserve your place? In this story, we follow Darius King, a composed and empathetic tech leader, as he transforms personal injustice into a catalyst for change. From the stunned silence of fellow passengers to a viral letter that topples an airline's policies, every step raises the stakes. Who will stand beside him? What hidden biases will be exposed? And can one voice at 35,000 feet really shift the course of a giant airline? If you crave powerful narratives that challenge injustice and inspire action, hit like, share, and subscribe now. Your journey with us begins here. The airport was still waking up. Outside the wide glass windows of Terminal C at Charlotte Douglas International, streaks of gray dawn stretched across the tarmac. Inside, the coffee line buzzed. Boarding calls echoed in calm monotone, and the familiar scent of jet fuel and floor polish clung to the air. Darius King checked his watch. 5:52 His flight to Portland was on time. Gate 27 was already boarding pre-check and military families. Darius adjusted the cuff of his navy suit, stepped forward, and handed his phone to the gate agent with a soft nod. "Good morning, Mr. King," the young man greeted. "You're all set. Seat 1C. Enjoy your flight." Darius offered a polite smile. "Appreciate it." He moved down the jet bridge with a calm, deliberate stride. He'd taken this route 100 times, probably more. Conferences, investor meetings, speaking engagements. His life moved from tarmac to tarmac, each flight just another bridge between cities where change was needed. But today felt different. He didn't know why yet. Maybe it was the speech. Maybe it was the weight of everything happening in the world. Or maybe it was that restless voice inside him that had grown louder with each passing year, the one that whispered that no matter how far he climbed, someone would always question whether he belonged at the top. Darius stepped into the cabin of the Solara Air 787. It smelled of fresh leather and morning coffee. First class was mostly empty this early. He spotted his seat immediately 1C aisle. He placed his briefcase in the overhead bin, careful not to wrinkle his notes, then settled into the wide leather seat. The soft hum of the aircraft, the gentle clink of pre-flight prep. It was all routine now. He slipped on his reading glasses and opened his speech draft. He was scheduled to speak at the Oregon Tech Summit on corporate responsibility in AI. Not the most glamorous slot, but meaningful. He had rewritten it twice. This time, he was determined to say what he really believed. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp. Too sharp for this early hour. Darius looked up. A flight attendant stood by his seat. She was in her early 50s, with a stiff bob of silver blonde hair and a frown that seemed permanent. Her name tag read, Carla. He removed his glasses. Yes, she didn't smile. This seat is for first-class passengers only. There was no warmth in her voice, no question, just a flat assertion of authority. Darius blinked once, calmly. "I believe I'm in the right place." Her eyes narrowed slightly, flicking down to his navy suit, then back up to his face. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass." He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and tapped open the Solara Air app. With practiced precision, He held the glowing screen toward her. Boarding Group 1. Yes, Seat 1C, First Class. The barcode shimmered in the cabin light. Carla didn't look at the screen. She kept her gaze locked on Darius's eyes, her lips tightening. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while we verify." The tone in her voice wasn't about procedure. It was about assumption. From the row behind, a dry chuckle rang out. "You sure about that?" "Sweetheart," came a voice. Male. Older. Amused. Probably just someone cutting through. Darius didn't turn around, but he felt the heat rise behind him. He exhaled through his nose, steady. Years of boardrooms and power plays had taught him how to breathe in tension and exhale control. "I assure you," he said, voice low but firm, "I've paid for this seat. Feel free to verify with your system." Carla folded her arms. "I'm just doing my job." "I understand," he replied. She hesitated, then turned without another word and stepped into the galley. From the corner of his eye, Darius saw the man in 2D lean forward. Caucasian, mid-60s, khaki jacket, smug smile. He looked directly at Darius. "No offense, pal," the man said, "but you don't see a lot of tech guys flying first class out of Charlotte." Darius turned his head slowly. "Apparently," he replied. "You don't see enough." The man raised an eyebrow and leaned back, unbothered. Darius sat still, hands on his lap. He could feel the stares now. Not overt, but present. The little glances, the questions behind the eyes, the silent inventory of his worth. It was always there. But some days, it was louder. Carla returned. Her face was tighter now, her tone even colder. "Mr. King," she said, "there appears to be an issue with our manifest. I'll need you to follow me so we can sort it out." Darius didn't move. "Is there a problem with my boarding pass?" She hesitated. "Our system doesn't show you in seat 1C. Your gate agent confirmed it," he said. "We'll figure it out. Please follow me." He knew he had a choice. Make a scene or make a plan. With a calm breath, Darius stood. He retrieved his bag. As he stepped into the aisle, he caught one more look from the man in 2D. The smirk on his face, the silent, "told you so." And from the back of the cabin, somewhere deeper, a pair of wide eyes watched silently. A boy, 10, maybe 11, black, curious. Darius locked eyes with him for just a moment, then followed Carla down the aisle. 35 rows. That's how far it felt. Not just in distance, but in judgment. Not one voice spoke up. And Darius King, CEO of Nuvalent Technologies, founder of one of the fastest-growing AI firms in the country, with a net worth in the 9 figures, took the long walk to coach, quietly. The hum of the aircraft seemed louder in the silence that followed. Darius King walked down the aisle with measured steps. Each row passed like a quiet verdict. Row 6, row 12, row 19. No one said a word, but he felt the invisible pull of every glance and every assumption. Behind him, Carla Whitmore moved briskly, her heels clicking like punctuation marks to his presence. She did not offer an apology, not even the courtesy of discomfort, just efficiency, as though she were escorting a misplaced bag, not a man. Passengers looked up and quickly away, some furrowed brows. Others offered a flicker of a smile, but no one intervened. It was not new. Darius had learned years ago that silence was often the loudest companion to injustice. They stopped at the back of the aircraft, the final row. "This is available," Carla said flatly, gesturing to a cramped middle seat wedged between a heavy-set man who was already snoring and a child by the window, sketching in a small notepad. Darius glanced at the empty seat. then back at her. "This isn't what I paid for." "I understand," she replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "We'll sort it after takeoff." He studied her expression for a moment. Cold, resolved, like this was a nuisance to be filed away. Darius gave a slight nod, not of agreement, but of strategy. He placed his briefcase carefully in the overhead bin, removed his tablet, then slid into the narrow middle seat. The armrests pressed against him like accusation. His knees nearly touched the seat in front of him. The boy beside him glanced up. Big eyes, brown, quiet, curious. He said nothing, just held his pencil and paused in his sketching. Darius offered him a small, tired smile. The boy smiled back. Tentative, gentle. Darius turned forward, closed his eyes for a moment, and inhaled. He opened his tablet, pulled up the Notes app. His fingers hovered over the screen. A moment passed, then he began to type. Gate 27, Flight 344, Charlotte to Portland. Departure time, 6:30 pose, A. Mom. Lead flight attendant Carla Whitmore. Seat 1C, denied, relocated. No explanation beyond not on manifest. Passenger in 2D made remark. Probably a mistake or a favor. He paused. His thumb lingered on the screen. What was he doing? A complaint? A personal journal? Or was this something else? He knew this wasn't just about a seat. It was about the space you were allowed to take up. The space people thought you deserved. He typed, "They do not see your resume, your company, your years of sweat and sacrifice. They see a disruption in the pattern they expect." The plane hadn't yet taken off. The safety demonstration hadn't begun. And already, Darius felt as if they'd all taken flight without him. The man on his left snored louder. The boy on his right returned to his sketchbook. Darius peeked. It was a drawing of the airplane. He was surprisingly good. Confident lines, proportions intact. The boy caught him looking and blushed. "You draw I used to," Darius replied. "Not like that, though." The boy smiled again. "I'm Miles. Darius," he said. "Nice to meet you." Miles nodded politely and went back to his sketch. Darius returned to his screen, opened the voice memo app. Without lifting the tablet, he hit record, just in case. He whispered the time, the gate, the names. He paused again. Should he really be doing this? What would it accomplish? He thought about the man in 2D, about Carla, about the way people had looked away. Then he thought about his niece, 13 years old, about to start high school, about the talk he had just given her last month. They'll try to make you feel small, but don't let them. You deserve to be anywhere your work can take you. He hit resume on the recorder. Today, I boarded a plane with a confirmed first-class ticket. I was removed from my seat without valid cause. I was relocated to the last row. No apology, no acknowledgement, no accountability. He stopped. That was enough for now. He saved the file. Then, as the aircraft began to taxi, he looked out the window across Miles's shoulder. The runway stretched into the morning fog. The plane lifted, and Darius King stayed grounded, in thought, in wait, in quiet, simmering clarity. The seat was uncomfortable. The armrests were narrow. The overhead vent hummed with a low, dry breath that didn't quite reach his face. Darius King shifted slightly, stretching his back without bumping the man to his left, still snoring loudly. The middle seat felt like a punishment, not just in proximity, but in principle. He looked down at the Notes app again. He scrolled through the lines he had typed during boarding, watching his own words with a strange detachment. They no longer felt like notes. They felt like testimony, a record, something he needed to leave behind, not just for himself, but for whoever might read it. Next to him, Miles continued sketching, focused, silent. Occasionally, he paused and looked out the window, as if studying the wing for reference. Darius took a slow breath and opened a new page. This one wasn't a log of events. This was something else. A letter, maybe, a reflection, a declaration. He tapped the first words with steady thumbs. "This isn't about a seat." He stopped. Let the sentence sit for a moment. It's about where you're allowed to exist without apology. He stared at the sentence. It rang in his head like a bell. He knew the feeling too well. He typed on. "My name is Darius King. I am the founder and CEO of Nuvalent Technologies, a company I built from scratch. I've led teams across 3 continents. I've spoken at MIT and been on the cover of 2 business magazines. And this morning, I was told without question, without consideration, that I did not belong in the seat I paid for." He paused again. From the corner of his eye, he saw Miles looking at him. Darius tilted his tablet slightly, showing him the screen. The boy read quietly, lips moving, then nodded. "Are you writing a story?" he asked. Darius smiled gently. "Maybe." "You're good at it," Miles said. "It's serious." Darius chuckled softly. "Yeah, I guess it is." Miles went back to his drawing. Darius returned to the letter. "The woman who removed me never asked for my name, never verified the information on my ticket. She made a decision before she spoke. That decision had nothing to do with policy. It had everything to do with perception." He tapped the next lines with more weight. "Because when you look like me, people don't always wait for the facts. They act first. They assume. They correct. And they expect you to comply." He looked down at his hands. Smooth, dark skin, clean fingernails, a wedding ring he rarely removed. He remembered being 13, sitting with his father in the back of their old Chevy, when they were pulled over for no reason. He remembered the silence in the car after the officer left, his father's hands gripping the wheel too tightly. The words he finally spoke. "Son, you can't control how they see you, but you can control how you answer." Darius looked at Miles again. He was shading the edge of a wing, careful with the angle. "Do you fly a lot?" Darius asked. Miles nodded. "Yeah, my dad works in Texas. We visit him on holidays." "You like flying?" The boy paused. "I like it when it feels fair." Darius blinked slowly. That answer hit harder than it should have. He returned to his letter. "I did not raise my voice. I did not resist. I did not make a scene. Not because I agreed, but because I understood what would happen if I didn't comply. I knew the cost of being labeled uncooperative, or worse, angry." He glanced across the aisle, saw a woman peeking toward him, then quickly looking away. He kept typing. The silence from the other passengers said everything. No one said, "This seems wrong." No one asked if I needed help. They watched, some curious, some indifferent, some likely thinking, "He must have done something." He stopped. That sentence hurt to write. He inhaled and kept going. You start to notice how often people give you the benefit of the doubt, or how rarely they do. You start to understand that in some places, your credentials don't walk in before you do. Your skin does. He didn't mean it to be poetic, but it was true. He saved the document, read it over once, then opened the voice memo again and added a few soft-spoken notes. "The flight attendant never asked for my name. Passenger in 2D made a comment. I have the full boarding pass on my app. I recorded part of the conversation. We'll review later. He looked toward the front of the plane. From here, the first-class curtain was barely visible. It rippled with every slight movement of the aircraft, like a veil he had been pulled from, like a reminder. His eyes drifted back to Miles, who was now coloring the tail of the plane in red. Do you like art? Darius asked. Miles nodded. A lot. My teacher said I see angles differently. Darius smiled. Sounds like an architect. I want to design airports, Miles said proudly. But better ones. With better planes. Better seats, too, Darius asked, a smirk forming. Miles giggled. Definitely. Darius laughed. A real one this time. Light? Clean? For a moment, it cut through the heaviness. He leaned back, closed his eyes briefly, and then he thought, what if I never wrote this down? What if I just let it pass? He opened his phone again, tapped to post, but stopped. He hesitated. Is this too soon? Too raw? Then he saw the smirk again, the face of the man in 2D. He remembered Carla's voice, the certainty of her dismissal. He looked at Miles, who was now drawing a control tower, and he tapped, This isn't about a seat. He copied the first few paragraphs of his letter into a tweet. It's about where you're not allowed to exist quietly. He attached the voice memo, just the opening, just enough, and he pressed send. The phone vibrated once, then again, and then again. He looked down. The first retweet had already landed, then 5 more, then a reply from a name he recognized, a writer from the New York Times. He locked the phone and placed it on the tray table. He didn't need to watch it unfold. He had said what needed to be said. The aircraft continued cruising at 35,000 feet, but something deeper had just begun to rise. The flight settled into its long, steady hum as the plane leveled off above the clouds. The window beside Miles now revealed a wide, sun-splashed panorama, and Darius found himself staring at the patchwork below, the landscape distant and quiet. He had expected his heart rate to slow after posting the letter, but it hadn't. His chest still felt tight. His hands rested on his lap, steady on the outside but sparking with a strange, jittery electricity beneath the surface. He glanced at Miles, who was adding clouds to his drawing, and then at the man to his left, whose snoring had become a soundtrack, steady and oblivious. Darius turned his attention inward, letting the drone of the engines become background noise to the story replaying itself in his mind. He thought about the moment he rose from seat 1C, the awkward gathering of his things, the cold stare from Carla Whitmore, and the even colder silence from the other passengers. That walk 35 rows, each step echoing in his memory, felt like a parade of quiet judgment. He had tried to count the faces as he passed, to memorize their reactions. Some were turned away, feigning sleep or distraction, but many watched him, their expressions shifting between curiosity, discomfort, and in a few cases, a smug sense of confirmation. He was not a stranger to this sensation, but each time it happened, it hurt in new ways. Darius wondered if Miles had seen it, if the boy had noticed the walk and understood what it meant. He found himself hoping that Miles, young as he was, could still believe that the world would be fair, that rules applied equally, that tickets and titles mattered more than the assumptions that came with skin and presence. A memory surfaced Darius, years ago. A young consultant in Chicago, denied entry to a boardroom he was supposed to lead. The security guard, apologetic but unmoved, had asked him to wait in the lobby until his superior arrived. Darius had waited, just like now. He had not argued, just as now. He had written about that day too, but only in the privacy of a journal. He thought about the cost of that calm, about the anger swallowed and the dignity he was always trying to protect. Was it wisdom or just self-preservation? Miles nudged him gently with his elbow. Darius looked down and saw that the boy had finished his drawing. He had drawn the airplane in perfect profile, soaring above a city that looked suspiciously like Charlotte. The plane's tail was colored with bold red stripes, and there was a little figure in the window, waving. "That's you," Miles said, pointing to the tiny waving hand. Darius smiled, warmth cutting through the heaviness in his chest. "It's a good likeness," he said. "Do you want to keep it?" Miles shook his head. "It's for you," he said simply, and tore the page out of his notepad, handing it to Darius. "So you remember this flight?" Darius folded the page carefully, placing it inside his briefcase. "Thank you, Miles. I won't forget." For a while, they sat in companionable silence. Miles returned to his sketching, now working on a drawing of the terminal as he remembered it. The man on Darius's left shifted in his seat but did not wake. Darius's phone vibrated on his tray table. He picked it up and saw a flood of notifications, retweets, comments, messages. The first wave of responses to his letter had begun. He scrolled through a few. Some were supportive, some angry, some dismissive. Most of them, though, were just people sharing their own stories, echoes of humiliation, and moments where they, too, had felt small. He read a message from a woman named Candace in Atlanta. She wrote, "I was told to move from business class for a glitch last year. Reading this hurt. Thank you for saying something." He scrolled further, his finger pausing over a reply from a man named James, who simply wrote, "Been there. Too many times." There was power in that chorus, Darius thought, but there was pain too. The pain of knowing he was not alone. He opened his email app and drafted a quick note to his assistant, letting her know that he might be late to the conference, depending on what happened with Solar Air after landing. He debated whether to mention the incident, then decided against it for now. He needed to see how it unfolded. He put the phone down and looked out the window again. The sky was impossibly wide, blue and white in every direction. He wondered, for a moment, if Carla was aware of the story rising on the other side of that curtain. Did she suspect that her quiet act of dismissal was already out in the world, echoing in ways she hadn't intended? He doubted it. He watched as Luis Ortega, another member of the crew, came through with a tray of drinks. Luis paused when he reached Darius's row, glancing down at the manifest on his tablet, then at Darius. "Can I get you something?" "Sir?" Luis asked, his tone softer, more careful. "Coffee would be great. Thank you," Darius replied. Luis nodded, disappeared, then returned a moment later with a cup of coffee and a package of biscotti. As he handed them over, he said in a low voice, "If you need anything, just let me know." Darius met his eyes. There was something in Luis's expression, a mix of sympathy and tension, maybe even a silent apology. "Thank you. Luis?" Darius said, emphasizing the name on the badge. Luis gave the smallest nod and moved on. Darius sipped his coffee, the bitterness sharp and grounding. He thought about the choices people made, who stood up, who looked away, who extended a hand. He thought about the invisible calculations that governed so many interactions. He wondered if he should have pressed harder, raised his voice, demanded justice in that moment, instead of accepting the walk. But then he remembered what his father had told him so many years ago. "The world will see your anger but you have to show them your strength." He looked at Miles, saw the boy's steady concentration, the hope still flickering in his eyes. Darius felt the old resolve settle back into his chest. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes again. He added a line. "This story isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever had to walk down that aisle, head high, while the world decided whether you belonged." As the plane pressed forward toward Portland, Darius let the weight of the walk recede and prepared himself for the next chapter. Whatever came next, he was ready to meet it quietly, but without apology. The flight had entered its cruising phase, the turbulence long gone. The passengers around Darius had shifted into their own routines, lost in their books, movies, and sleep. For a while, there was a hush that felt almost peaceful, but the calm on the outside did not match the storm inside Darius's mind. He scrolled through more messages on his phone, each notification a new ripple in the growing story. Some were short and powerful. Others were full of details. He saw more people coming forward, not just black travelers, but others who had experienced humiliation, misjudgment, or outright dismissal at the hands of people in power. Every story made his chest feel both heavier and lighter, like he was shouldering something important. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice from up front. The curtain that separated first class from coach rustled as Lyle McPherson, the passenger from 2D, stepped back into the main cabin. Lyle sauntered down the aisle with the easy arrogance of someone who had never been told he did not belong. He stopped by the restroom near the rear of the plane, then lingered in the aisle, pretending to stretch his back. As Lyle glanced around, his gaze settled on Darius. Their eyes met for just a moment. Lyle gave a half smirk, almost as if to say, "I see you down here." He looked away, but Darius could feel the message. Even without words, the boy, Miles, had noticed the exchange. He leaned a little closer to Darius, lowering his voice to a whisper. "That man up front, he looked at you funny when you walked back here." Darius nodded, grateful for the child's honesty. "He did," Darius replied. "But you know what? Sometimes when people don't understand your journey, they assume you're lost." Miles seemed to think about that for a while. He nodded, then carefully colored the cockpit windows on his new drawing. A few minutes later, Carla Whitmore walked through the aisle with the trash bag, collecting empty cups and wrappers. When she reached Darius's row, she did not meet his eyes. Instead, she looked past him, focusing on the tray table in front of the snoring man. She paused, glanced at Miles's drawing, and offered a perfunctory trash before moving on. It was as if Darius were invisible, not worth a greeting, let alone an apology. He watched her continue down the aisle, her back straight, her stride quick, every movement meant to show control. Darius felt a flicker of anger. Not the kind that shouted or demanded attention, but the slow-burning kind, the kind that fueled resolve. He picked up his tablet and continued writing his letter, the sentences forming sharper now. The flight attendant saw the proof. She looked at my boarding pass and chose not to see it. She looked at me and decided I did not fit her idea of who belonged in first class. She did not ask for my story. She did not want to know. He paused, hands trembling slightly. He thought about erasing that last line, worried it was too harsh, too personal. But then he remembered every other time he had chosen softer words, diluted his own experience so it would be easier for others to swallow. He left it in. He thought of the hundreds of silent humiliations he had endured in the past, the polite dismissals, the missed introductions, The way he was too often mistaken for staff at events where he was the keynote speaker, the microaggressions, subtle and persistent, were always harder to prove. But their sting lingered much longer than any single insult. He looked up as Lyle made his way back to first class. The man caught Darius's eye, gave a quick little laugh, and shook his head. Darius saw Carla standing in the galley, facing away from the coach section, talking quietly to another flight attendant. Miles looked up from his drawing, noticing Darius' tension. "Did you do something wrong?" he asked, his voice soft and careful. Darius shook his head. "No, Miles. Sometimes people just want you to believe you did." Miles absorbed that quietly. "My mom says people are scared of things they don't understand." "She's right," Darius replied. "Sometimes people act mean because it's easier than learning something new." Miles seemed to take comfort in that. He started sketching again, this time drawing two planes, one above the other, but both in flight. Darius turned back to his letter. He described the entire incident in vivid detail. The feeling of walking past rows of passengers, the way some people looked at him and others looked away, the burn of humiliation, not just for himself, but for every black man or woman who had ever felt their value measured by someone else's standard. He described Carla's indifference, the absence of empathy. He wrote about Lyle's laugh, the mocking undertone. He wrote about the boy beside him, about the small kindness of a simple drawing in a world too often complicated by prejudice. A sudden wave of uncertainty washed over him. He wondered if he was making too much of this, if the world would call him oversensitive, if sharing this story would invite backlash. He closed his eyes for a moment, searching for a center. He thought of his wife, Maya, and how she would remind him that telling the truth was never the problem. That silence, the kind that covers pain, was the real enemy. He opened his eyes and reread what he had written. It was raw, honest, and true. He would not change it. As the seatbelt sign dinged and the captain's voice came over the speakers, Darius felt a new surge of resolve. He saved his letter and uploaded a short excerpt to his social feed, attaching a single sentence. "Sometimes the price of dignity is a walk no one else will remember, but you will never forget." He included Miles's drawing, with the boy's permission. His phone lit up with notifications, each one a small sign that the story was being seen, heard, and felt. He looked at Miles, who had finished his latest sketch and was now adding color to the sun rising behind the plane. "Thank you for sitting with me," Darius said, voice quiet but sincere. Miles smiled. "I'm glad you're here." Darius smiled back, hope flickering in his chest. In the shadow of laughter and coldness, the warmth of a child's understanding was the truest comfort of all. For the next hour, Darius sat in the cramped seat, watching the world move by 35,000 feet below. The hum of the engines and the quiet murmur of the cabin made the space around him feel both isolated and exposed. He sipped the lukewarm coffee Luis had brought, reading more responses to his latest post. His story had begun to take on a life of its own. He saw his tweet gaining momentum, the number of retweets and replies growing faster than he could keep up. There were messages from strangers offering support, some from colleagues in the tech industry, others from black professionals in all walks of life. Some messages were full of pain, recounting similar incidents, misplaced suspicions, unjust removals, silent walks down public aisles. He read each story, each testimony, with a sense of both sadness and purpose. A DM arrived from a journalist at a national news outlet, asking if he would comment on the incident when he landed. Another was from a civil rights lawyer who offered her services, pro bono. There were questions from friends. Are you okay? Is this real? And from his wife? Maya, I saw your post. I love you. Let me know how I can help. Darius replied quickly to Maya, assuring her he was all right and would call as soon as the plane landed. Then he closed his eyes for a moment, letting the soft chime of the seatbelt sign, the scent of brewed coffee, and the white noise of air travel wash over him. He opened his eyes and noticed Miles watching him again. Are you famous? The boy asked. Darius laughed softly, shaking his head. Not really. Why do you ask? Miles held up his drawing, showing the little plane with the waving figure. You're on your phone a lot, and people keep messaging you. Only famous people get that many messages. Darius considered how to answer. Sometimes when you tell the truth, people listen. Sometimes they just need to know they're not alone. Miles nodded thoughtfully, then went back to his sketchbook. Darius felt a surge of gratitude for the child's presence, the gentle honesty that cut through the noise of everything else. He wondered what it would be like for Miles, growing up, if stories like his could help change what was possible for the next generation. A notification appeared on his phone, this time from someone he did not know, a profile with a nondescript photo and a username that hinted at anonymity. The message was brief. It happens more than you think. Check your DMs. He clicked through and found a longer message waiting. The sender claimed to be a former flight attendant at Solar Air, and what they described made Darius sit up straighter in his seat. The message read, I saw your story. I used to work for Solara. This is not new. There's a pattern. Certain passengers, mostly black or brown, are moved from first class more often than others. Sometimes it's framed as a paperwork glitch, sometimes as overbooking. But the result is always the same. I left because I couldn't be part of it anymore. Good luck. Darius read the message again, feeling his jaw clench. It confirmed what he had suspected, what so many had hinted at in their stories, but rarely could prove. It wasn't just his experience, it was a system. He started to reply, then stopped. Would this person be willing to go public? Could he ask for more details? He decided to keep the response simple, respectful. Thank you for telling me. If you're ever comfortable sharing more, let me know. Your story matters. He stared at his screen for a long time, thinking. The world was watching now, and not just because of him. He was only the latest in a long line of people forced to explain, to defend, to justify their right to exist in certain spaces. The cabin lights dimmed as the crew prepared for landing. Darius saw Carla moving through first class, her back straight, her eyes forward. She did not glance back toward Coach. He wondered if she even knew about the online storm, if anyone had texted her, if she was even aware that a single decision could ripple out into so many lives. He thought about the company behind her uniform. Solara Air was proud of its image, diverse ads, glossy brochures about equity and excellence. Darius wondered how many other stories, just like his, had been swept aside under the banner of customer confusion. He reopened his letter and began to write again, feeling his words sharpen with conviction. This is not an isolated incident. I have received dozens of messages since I posted about my experience. Each story is different in the details, but the pattern is the same. People moved. People doubted. People erased. It's easier to blame a glitch or a miscommunication than to examine the assumptions beneath every decision. He described the message from the former flight attendant, careful not to reveal any identifying details. He wrote about the messages from other travelers, He wrote about Miles, the boy beside him, and the hope he represented. He wrote about the weight of never knowing if you'd be the next headline, the next story, the next reminder that belonging is sometimes granted or withheld at the whim of others. He paused to think, letting the meaning of his own words settle in. He thought of the internal struggle he had felt earlier in the flight. Was it better to stay quiet? Was he making a scene? Was he risking too much by being honest? But now, with every new story and every new voice joining the chorus, Darius felt the burden of self-doubt lift. He understood that telling the truth was never about revenge. It was about visibility. It was about making sure that no child, no passenger, no person had to wonder if they were the only one. The captain announced their descent into Portland. Darius saved his letter and checked the messages one more time. The tweet was now trending. The hashtag, "WAO, not just a seat," appearing in dozens of posts. Journalists were asking to speak with him. A national morning show wanted to book an interview. For a moment, he felt the swirl of anxiety return. Was he ready for this? Was he strong enough to carry not only his story, but the weight of all these others? He looked at Miles, still quietly drawing, and made up his mind. He tapped out a final tweet before landing. "To everyone who shared their story with me, you are seen. You are heard. This is not just my fight. It's ours." As the wheels touched down, Darius King felt something he had not felt at the beginning of the flight. Not anger, not fear, but purpose. Whatever storm waited outside, he was ready to face it. The wheels hit the Portland runway with a soft jolt and a drawn-out whine. Darius King felt his body lean forward with the motion, the tension in his chest slowly releasing as the plane slowed and the flight attendants made their final rounds. It was just past 9, and sunlight poured through the cabin windows, bright and hopeful. Yet, inside, Darius felt a mix of relief and apprehension, like someone waiting for the verdict after a long, public trial. He checked his phone as soon as airplane mode could be safely switched off. Instantly, the device came alive, buzzing, lighting up, and chiming in rapid succession. It was as if all the anxiety and frustration of the flight had been bottled up, only to be uncorked at this very moment. Dozens of notifications, hundreds of mentions, and an overflowing inbox all pulsed for his attention. His heart thumped, steady and sharp, as he opened his social feed. His tweet, and then his follow-up message, had gone viral. There were thousands of retweets, comments, and reactions. The hashtag, "Not Just a Seat," trended near the top in several major cities. Another hashtag, "Fly with Dignity," was gaining ground. People were sharing screenshots, news articles, and even short videos recorded by other passengers. The story had become a living thing, growing in real time, branching out in every direction. For a moment, Darius felt strangely distant from it all. The words were his. The experience was his. But now the story belonged to the world. He scrolled through comments, some angry, some tearful, many grateful. Messages came from strangers in airports, from corporate offices, from living rooms late at night. He realized the story had already moved far beyond the boundaries of that plane or his own struggle. A news alert appeared at the top of his phone. National Tech CEO removed from first class, airline faces backlash. He hesitated, wondering whether to read it, then decided to wait. He needed to move, to feel his feet on solid ground. Miles nudged him, eyes wide. "Is that your phone?" the boy asked. "It's lighting up like Christmas." Darius smiled at the analogy. "It is," he said. "Sometimes when people share the truth, It travels faster than any plane. Miles looked at him with curiosity and admiration, as if trying to understand how someone could make that happen just by speaking up. The cabin doors opened, and the rush of passengers collecting bags and jackets filled the air with a new kind of energy. Darius waited for the aisle to clear a bit, letting the more impatient travelers jostle ahead. He watched as Carla Whitmore, the flight attendant, busied herself with her tasks, never once meeting his eyes as he prepared to exit. When it was their turn, Darius stood and helped Miles with his backpack. Miles's mother, a warm-faced woman with kind eyes, greeted him at the front of the cabin. "Thank you for keeping an eye on him," she said softly. "It was my pleasure," Darius replied. Glancing down at Miles's newest drawing, a picture of two planes, both flying high, both with passengers waving from the windows. Outside the jet bridge, Darius checked his phone again. A voicemail from a reporter at the Portland Tribune, an email from Solara Air's public relations office, asking for a private statement, a message from his assistant, who was fielding inquiries from national television and cable news. He hesitated, wondering how much of himself he was willing to give to this story. He wondered what the price of his honesty would be, not just for him, but for his company, for his family, for everyone who saw something of themselves in his experience. But the choice felt clear. This was bigger than discomfort or embarrassment. This was about something deeply broken that needed to be seen in the daylight. He made his way through the busy terminal, listening to the familiar sounds of suitcase wheels on tile, the echoes of airport announcements, and the urgent footsteps of travelers with connections to make. He stopped for a moment at a window overlooking the runway, watching another Solara Airjet take off into the sky. He remembered his first business trip years ago, when a mentor had told him, "It's not enough to make it. You have to make it possible for someone else." He remembered the ache he felt then, the hope that if he just worked hard enough, played by the rules, and wore the right suit, there would be a day when he could simply board a plane and be seen as he was. His phone vibrated again. Another message, this one from a black executive at a rival tech firm. It read, "You spoke for all of us today. Let's talk soon." Darius exhaled, feeling both the weight and the privilege of that responsibility. He took a moment to compose a reply to Solara Air's request. He kept it short and direct. "I will not be making a private statement. My experience is now public, and I expect your response to be just as transparent." He sent the message and slipped his phone back into his pocket. His hands were steady now. At baggage claim, his bag appeared quickly, almost as if the universe were offering a small mercy after the chaos. He saw news crews setting up outside, their microphones and lights at the ready. For a moment, he considered slipping out the side entrance, avoiding the glare. But then he caught sight of Miles and his mother again, waving goodbye as they left for ground transportation. Miles lifted his drawing one last time, giving Darius a silent nod of encouragement. Darius smiled and waved back, feeling grounded by the gesture. He turned toward the waiting cameras, straightened his jacket, and walked forward with his head held high. The airport was buzzing, not just with the noise of travel, but with a growing sense of momentum. People recognized him now. Some nodded, some whispered. A woman with a baby stopped and touched his arm, whispering, "Thank you." He nodded in return, realizing that this journey was no longer just about him or about a single flight. The story had become a chorus, and he had simply struck the first note. He stepped into the camera's frame, ready for the next round of questions. He was tired, but determined. The reporter smiled. microphone raised. "Mr. King, can you tell us in your own words what happened on that flight?" Darius took a slow breath. "I was denied my seat because someone made a decision based on who they thought belonged in first class. I documented it. I shared it. And now the world has a chance to see what too many of us have been through." He spoke calmly, with measured honesty, and let the truth carry forward, knowing it was already echoing far beyond the reach of the terminal. As Darius King left the baggage claim behind, the morning in Portland was already in full motion. Taxis lined up at the curb. Rideshare drivers waited with names on their phones, and the air carried a crisp scent of rain on concrete. He paused for a moment under the overhang, taking in a long breath, grounding himself before the day moved forward. The cameras were gone, having moved on to the next story. The reporters had gotten their footage, his voice sound-bitten for the evening news. But Darius's story was still multiplying online, his words being shared and reshared in every corner of the country. The exhaustion of travel mingled with the adrenaline of being at the center of a conversation so much larger than himself. He scrolled through more messages as he waited for his car. Stories poured in by the minute, some short and raw, others long and carefully recounted. Darius found himself reading more than replying, his thumb slowing down as he tried to take it all in. He saw a story from a woman in Cleveland, another from a grandfather in Tulsa, dozens from business travelers who never raised their voices, who had never told anyone until now. His phone buzzed with a new kind of notification, a private video sent from someone he did not know. The message simply read, "You need to see this. I was there." He hesitated, then pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed from a row or two behind first class on his flight. It showed him Darius sitting in seat 1C, holding out his phone to Carla. Her face was visible in profile, expression cold and unmoving. Her lips moved, and the audio captured the exchange. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while we verify," she said. Darius's voice was quiet, but clear. "Is there a problem with my boarding pass?" Her reply, "Our system doesn't show you in seat 1C. The video caught it all, the tone, the posture, the lack of even a glance at his ticket. As he watched, Darius's jaw clenched. The person filming didn't move the camera, but the focus zoomed in enough to capture the faces, the body language, the unspoken message. At the end, as he gathered his bag, the camera caught a whisper from the passenger. He shouldn't have to go. It wasn't long, just under a minute, but it was enough. Darius felt a mix of relief and anger. The video was proof, not just for him, but for every voice who had already begun to doubt or deflect, for every person who insisted it was just a mistake. He messaged the sender, "Thank you. This matters more than you know." His car arrived, a silver sedan with a soft-spoken driver. Darius settled into the back seat, watching the city pass by through rain-streaked windows. He was grateful for the privacy, the hush of the interior after so much public scrutiny. He replayed the video in his mind as the car wound through the city streets. He wondered about the person behind the phone, the passenger who had the presence to bear witness, who had chosen to share instead of scroll past. He imagined them watching the scene, feeling the injustice, feeling powerless at the time, but now finding a way to make a difference. He composed a post, attaching the video with a simple message. "For everyone who thinks these things are exaggerated or imagined, here's what it looks like in real life. Thank you to the person who shared this. Silence is a choice. Witnessing is another." Within minutes, his post was everywhere. The video gave a new dimension to the story, something unfiltered and undeniable. He watched the comments come in anger, support, heartbreak, and gratitude. There were also defenders, people who accused him of playing the victim, who insisted there had to be another side. But the voices of support drowned them out. For now. As the car pulled up to his hotel, Darius felt a sudden wave of weariness. The adrenaline that had kept him upright through the morning began to ebb. He checked in, went up to his room, and dropped his bag on the bed. For a long time, he simply sat by the window, watching the clouds drift over the city, feeling the crash of everything that had happened. He thought about the moments he almost did nothing, the times he nearly let it go, told himself it was easier not to make waves. He thought about every time he had convinced himself that calm was strength, that silence was safety. And yet, this time, he had chosen to speak, and someone else had chosen to act. The story was not just his anymore. It belonged to the passengers, to the viewers, to everyone who saw little of their own life in his walk down the aisle. A gentle knock came at his door. He opened it to find his assistant, Claire, standing with a clipboard and her laptop. "Welcome to Portland, Mr. King," she said, offering a sympathetic smile. "It's busy out there. Press is waiting downstairs." He nodded. "Let's schedule interviews after lunch." "I need a little time." Claire nodded, understanding. "You're trending everywhere." Solar Air just released a statement. He raised an eyebrow. "Already they're calling it a misunderstanding. They say you were reaccommodated due to a manifest error. No apology yet." Darius exhaled. He could already feel the spin, the attempt to frame the incident as technical, not personal. He glanced at his phone, reading the official words. The statement avoided the heart of the matter, mentioning policy, data, and the importance of customer satisfaction. He knew it was not enough, not for him, and not for the people reading along. He turned to Claire. "Draft my response. Be direct. Make it clear that an apology isn't enough. We want accountability and action. And tell them I have video evidence." Claire nodded, her fingers already moving across the screen. Anything else, he thought for a moment, his eyes drifting to the city below. "Remind them that this isn't just about me," he said softly. "It's about every person who ever sat quietly, hoping someone would see what was really happening." Claire smiled, full of quiet pride. "I'll take care of it." When she left, Darius sat down at his desk, hands folded. He replayed the video one more time, letting the truth of it settle over him. Then, with a sense of certainty, he prepared to step out again to answer questions, to demand more than apologies, and to make sure the story could not be swept away. As he walked toward the elevator, his phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message from Miles's mother, sent through social media. "Thank you for being kind to my son. He's been drawing planes all morning. He told me you made him feel proud. I hope you keep going." Darius read the message twice, smiling quietly. For all the noise and chaos, that was what mattered most. He closed his eyes, breathing in the hope that the next flight, for someone like Miles, would be different. Afternoon sunlight slid through the hotel windows as Darius King prepared for what felt like the second act of his day. After a quiet lunch and a phone call to Maya, his wife, he set his suit jacket over his shoulders, brushed invisible lint from the lapels, and checked his notes one more time. Downstairs, the hotel lobby was already buzzing. News vans lined the curb. Guests and staff pretended not to stare, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. His assistant, Claire, walked beside him, steering him gently through the reporters waiting at the entrance. Darius offered polite nods and a brief, "No comments just yet," as cameras clicked and microphones thrust toward his face. He kept moving, the voices fading as the car whisked him away to the heart of Portland's business district. His first meeting was not with the press, but with his own board. Nuvalin Technologies had called an emergency video session. Some directors joined from Europe, some from New York, faces drawn tight in the rectangle grid of the conference app. Darius sat at the head of the table in a reserved meeting room, a glass wall overlooking the city. At first, the conversation was all business, numbers, product launches, quarterly forecasts, but the story could not be ignored for long. One director cleared her throat. "Darius, the situation with Solaire Air is now international news. Investors are calling. The board is concerned about blowback both on you and the company." He listened, hands folded, weighing every word. Another director jumped in, voice tense. "Some clients are asking if you'll address the story. They want to know if you'll step away from public advocacy, at least until things cool down." Darius looked at their faces, reading the fear and discomfort between the lines. He recognized the old worry, keep quiet. Don't rock the boat. Protect the bottom line. For a moment, he felt a familiar urge to compromise, to reassure, to make himself smaller. But then he thought of Miles, of Maya's steady faith, of the voices that had filled his phone through the morning voices that reminded him why he was here. He spoke, his voice calm but unyielding. "This is not just about me, and it's not just about the company. We're part of something bigger. Every value we put in our brand statements, dignity, inclusion, innovation, means nothing if I can't live them outside the boardroom. I refuse to apologize for telling the truth." There was a pause. The air felt electric. One director, older and more conservative, sighed heavily. "I hope you know what you're doing. This could cost us." Darius nodded. Doing the right thing always costs something. But if we only stand for our values when it's convenient, then they're not values at all. They're just words on a wall. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, to his surprise, the youngest director, a Latina engineer from California, leaned forward. "He's right," she said. "Our people are watching. The world is watching. If we shrink from this, we're just another company with a diversity page on our website and nothing behind it." Slowly, other directors chimed in, some with caution, some with genuine support. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. Darius felt a current of relief, mingled with fresh anxiety. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had his resolve. The meeting ended, and Claire slipped him a printout of Solaire Air's latest press release. He scanned the page, noting the language regrettable incident, reviewing protocols, valuing all passengers. There was no direct apology, no mention of the video, nothing about accountability. Claire met his eyes. "It's not enough." Darius agreed. "We can't let this go quietly." He sent a brief, public reply to Solaire Air from his personal account. "Thank you for your statement. The world has seen what happened. I look forward to hearing how you plan to ensure it never happens again to anyone." He added the hashtags, "Not just a seat," and "Fly with dignity." Within minutes, his message was shared thousands of times. Public pressure was building. Civil rights groups issued statements. Other CEOs, some emboldened by his stand, began speaking up as well. He watched the story unfold on news channels in the office lounge. Clips of his encounter played on loop. The video sent by the anonymous passenger was now featured in several national broadcasts. Analysts debated the implications. Some wondered aloud if Solara Air's leadership would survive the scandal. Some questioned whether Darius's advocacy was good for business, but most agreed the moment felt different. Something had shifted. Late in the day, Darius received an email from the office of Solara Air's CEO, requesting a private conversation. He considered it carefully, then agreed, but insisted the call be recorded and his team present. When the meeting began, the airline CEO, James T. Harris, a man in his 60s with the polished confidence of a lifelong executive, appeared on screen. "Mr. King, I appreciate you taking the time," Harris began. "We want to sincerely apologize for what happened. We're reviewing our protocols, and the employee in question has been suspended pending investigation." Darius listened, but did not smile. A suspension isn't an answer. Protocols aren't enough. "I'd like to know what you plan to do for all the passengers who face this, not just me." Harris shifted uncomfortably. "We'll be launching diversity and sensitivity training for all frontline staff. We'll invite external review. We want your input." Darius kept his voice steady. "I'll consider it, but only if it's public, transparent, and leads to measurable change. And I'm not interested in being a figurehead. I want to see a process, one that doesn't end with a training seminar, but changes lives." The call ended with careful promises. Claire closed her laptop, looking at him with a new respect. That was brave. He nodded, letting the fatigue settle in. It's just the start. As dusk fell, Darius looked out over the city. He felt the weight of the day, but also the spark of possibility. The boardroom had not silenced him. The airline had been forced to answer. The world, it seemed, was listening. He checked his phone one more time before bed. Among the messages was one from Maya. It was simple. "I'm proud of you. We're with you all the way." Darius smiled, hope pushing back the tiredness. Tomorrow, he knew, the real work would begin. Darius woke before sunrise. The city outside his hotel window was still quiet, a veil of mist clinging to the rooftops, the sky painted with the first blush of morning light. It had been only 24 hours since the flight, but the world felt irrevocably changed. He brewed a cup of coffee, letting the silence steady him, and reviewed the day's schedule on his phone. There were more interviews, conference calls, and a scheduled town hall event with community leaders and activists, something Claire had quickly arranged after the flood of requests for Darius to speak publicly. His voice, once a private thing used to guide a team or reassure a child, now belonged to a national conversation. He checked his inbox, expecting the same press releases and messages from supporters, but what caught his eye was an email from a whistleblower. The sender's name was hidden behind a string of numbers, but the content was impossible to ignore. "I work for Solara Air. I've seen this before. I have documents showing that passengers like you have been targeted, moved from seats, flagged for additional checks. It isn't just random. If you want proof, I'll share what I have." Darius stared at the message. It was one thing to believe in a pattern, another to see it confirmed by someone inside the system. He quickly replied, "Thank you. Please send what you can. I promise to protect your identity." "Afterward," he messaged Claire, forwarding the email and asking her to coordinate with legal counsel and the media team. He felt the old surge of adrenaline, the sense of being at the edge of something monumental. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from Maya. He answered, and her voice was a gentle anchor. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Darius let the silence stretch before answering. "Tired, determined, ready for whatever comes next." "You're not alone in this," she said. Remember that. And remember, you didn't choose this fight, but you're choosing to see it through. He closed his eyes, letting her words settle his nerves. Thank you. I love you. As he dressed for the day, also Darius thought about what it meant to be seen, not just as a CEO or a victim of injustice, but as a full human being. The camera lights, the emails, the hashtags, none of them told the whole story. Only he knew the texture of the fear, the doubts in the dark. The weight of knowing every word he said now mattered. The lobby was buzzing when he stepped out. Claire at his side. Reporters and community members waited, some with microphones, others just with hope in their eyes. Darius greeted them all, shaking hands, offering quiet nods, listening to stories that mirrored his own. The town hall took place in a community center downtown, packed wall to wall with people. There were young activists, elders, airline employees, and families who brought their children to witness what felt like a turning point. The walls were lined with news cameras, their red lights blinking quietly. Darius sat at the head of the panel, flanked by civil rights leaders and advocates. The moderator introduced him not as the CEO of Nuvalin, but as a man whose story started a fire. The applause was warm, but Darius could feel the gravity behind it. This wasn't just support, it was expectation. He spoke honestly. I'm not here to be a symbol. I'm here because what happened to me happens to too many people. My story is just one of thousands. I don't want this to end with a trending hashtag. I want real change. For every person who's ever been told they don't belong. For every kid who wonders if the world will see them as enough. People asked hard questions. Some wanted to know if he believed Solara Air could change. Others asked if the system itself was broken beyond repair. A former airline attendant in the audience stood, voice trembling, and described how she'd been pressured to follow unwritten rules about who to watch, who to question, who to move. Darius listened, feeling the truth in her story. He offered only what he knew was real. Systems are made by people. They can be changed by people, but not if we stay silent. After the panel, people lined up to shake his hand, to thank him, to share their own pain and hope. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, gave him a letter she'd written on pink paper. It read, "Thank you for showing people like me that we matter." He pocketed the letter, heart full. Back at his hotel, Darius received a secure message. Attached were several documents, internal emails, seating manifests, and memos about passenger appearance and first-class eligibility review. The language was coded, but the intent was clear. Certain passengers were being profiled, sometimes moved, sometimes flagged, almost always black or brown. He forwarded the files to his legal team and trusted journalists. He knew this was the evidence the public needed, the undeniable proof that would push the conversation from speculation to fact. As the story broke that evening, the public reckoning intensified. Solara Air's leadership faced calls for resignation. Civil rights attorneys announced a class action lawsuit. Investors threatened to pull out unless sweeping reforms were enacted. The board of Solara Air held a press conference this time. The CEO looked shaken, the language different. He apologized directly, acknowledged the pattern, and pledged to overhaul hiring, training, and passenger review systems. But Darius was not satisfied with words alone. He called for transparency, public reports, independent oversight, and accountability from the top down. The country was watching, and for the first time, it felt as if change was more than just a promise. Later, as the news rolled on in the background, Darius took a walk through the city. He found a bench in a small park and sat, listening to the gentle sounds of evening. He thought of all the people who had messaged him, the ones who had thanked him, the ones who had told him to stay strong. He thought of Maya's quiet courage, of Miles and his drawings, of the passengers who had watched and wondered, unsure if they should intervene. He realized he was no longer walking alone. The fight belonged to all of them now. As darkness settled, Darius looked up at the stars and felt, for the first time in days, a quiet peace. The world was not yet fixed, but the silence had been broken. And that, he knew, was where real change always began. In the following days, the ripple effect of Darius King's ordeal spread far beyond Portland. The headlines continued to cycle, but now the tone had shifted. This was no longer just a personal humiliation or fleeting outrage. It had become a national debate about equity, power, and the hidden scaffolding that held up old systems. Every new revelation, from whistleblower documents to first-hand accounts, made it harder for Solara Air and its peers to hide behind apologies and policy jargon. Darius spent the week in meetings, interviews, and strategy sessions, every hour demanding more from his voice and his resolve. Civil rights attorneys brought him into conversations about class action lawsuits. Airline executives, including James T. Harris, reached out repeatedly, now asking for advice, for help repairing a reputation that had taken decades to build and days to shatter. The pressure was enormous, but so was the clarity he felt inside. One morning, Claire walked into his temporary office with a folder of letters. "All these came in for you," she said, "from schools, families, people who watch the news." Darius opened one at random. Inside was a note from a high school student in Atlanta. "Because you spoke up, my teacher made us talk about what's fair and what's not. I never realized before how easily someone can lose their seat just because of who they are." Another came from an elderly woman in Dallas. "My husband always said, stay quiet, do your job. But I see now sometimes you have to stand up, even if your voice shakes." Each letter was a small piece of the burden he had carried, now shared among thousands. The biggest shift came when the Congressional Committee on Transportation announced public hearings on discrimination in air travel. Darius was formally invited to testify, as were airline officials, union leaders, and other passengers who had faced similar treatment. The news sparked a fresh round of commentary, debate, and more importantly, commitments from other airlines to review and change their policies. The day before his testimony, Darius sat in the quiet of his hotel room, working through his statement. The gravity of what was to come weighed heavily on him. Every word he wrote felt important, every phrase a reflection not just of his experience, but of so many others whose names he might never know. He struggled with doubt. Would his story make a difference? Or would it be drowned out in the machinery of government and business? Would the people who wrote to him remember his words a year from now? Or would the world simply move on? He picked up his phone and called Maya. Her voice, calm and warm, steadied him once more. "Whatever you say it as yourself," she told him, not as a CEO, not as a symbol, just as a man who wants a better world for the next person in that seat. He took her advice to heart. The hearing was a spectacle: bright lights, national news cameras, politicians in suits, and a public gallery packed with people who had flown hundreds of miles to bear witness. Darius sat at the panel table, his name displayed for all to see. As the chair called him to speak, he felt his breath catch, then steady. He began. "Thank you for inviting me. I am Darius King, and a week ago I was denied my first-class seat on Solara Air, not because of a mistake or a mix-up, but because of a decision, a judgment made about who I was, who I appeared to be, and whether I belonged." He told the story from the beginning, including the walk down the aisle, the quiet humiliation, the small kindnesses, the wave of responses afterward. He shared excerpts from the letters he had received, the statistics sent to him by civil rights groups. The whistleblower documents that proved his case was not unique. "This is not about a single flight or a single company," he said. "It is about the quiet ways systems sort people into places. It is about what happens when silence is easier than justice. I am asking for more than an apology. I am asking for change." Questions followed from the committee. Some were supportive, others skeptical. A congressman pressed him on whether these incidents were truly systemic or just a matter of a few bad actors. Darius answered with calm, measured clarity. "When you have dozens of stories, when the patterns repeat, when even insiders say it's policy, not just accident, that's not individual bias, that's a system." He offered specific recommendations: stronger oversight, public data on removals and upgrades, independent ombudsmen for complaints, and real penalties for companies that failed to protect their passengers' dignity. His testimony, broadcast live, struck a chord. Commentators called it courageous. Newspapers published excerpts on their front pages. People around the country watched, listened, and began to ask new questions about how they traveled, how they worked, and who felt safe in public spaces. The airline's board met again. This time, they did not wait for the story to fade. Solara Air announced a sweeping set of reforms: third-party audits, ongoing anti-bias training, a complete review of complaint handling, and a public commitment to equity that would be monitored by an independent council, one that Darius would be invited to help lead. At home, Maya and their daughter watched the hearings. Miles's mother sent a photo of her son, proudly holding a drawing of two planes flying side by side. Claire, tireless as ever, managed the schedule, the press, and the flood of requests with quiet grace. Late that night, Darius walked outside, looking up at the sky, imagining all the people boarding planes, stepping into spaces they had once feared. He felt the enormity of it all, the anger, the hope, the sense of responsibility. He was tired, but not defeated. He was no longer just a passenger or a CEO. He was a witness, an advocate, a reminder that dignity could not be quietly traded for convenience. And in the stillness, under a sky big enough for everyone, he let himself believe that this time the world would not turn away. The year moved forward, but the story of Darius King's flight remained a current running beneath the surface of news cycles, business meetings, and the everyday rituals of travel. For months after the congressional hearing, he balanced his old responsibilities with new ones. At Nuvalin Technologies, his work as CEO continued, but now every leadership decision was laced with greater awareness. Every message to his team weighed with the gravity of what he had lived through. Solara Air, under unrelenting scrutiny, pushed ahead with its reforms. New faces entered leadership. External reviewers came in, not for show, but to truly measure progress. Flight attendants sat through training, sometimes skeptical, sometimes moved, sometimes simply tired of the discussion, but unable to ignore its necessity. The Ombudsman Office began publishing its first reports, revealing patterns that could not be denied. Some passengers wrote in to share positive changes. Others described moments when vigilance, not prejudice, had guided staff decisions. Darius took on his role as an independent advisor seriously. He met with Solara's board, sat down with skeptical executives, and fielded questions from frontline workers, some defensive, some apologetic, some genuinely searching for a way to be better. He insisted that the process be public, that metrics and stories alike be shared. Each time a new incident arose, the response was immediate, transparent, and most importantly, rooted in a new culture of accountability. He visited schools to talk about dignity. He joined calls with activists working on similar issues in other industries. He learned to pace himself, to rest between interviews, to let Maya hold his hand when the noise got too loud. Some days he still felt the ache of that walk down the plane's aisle. But the pain no longer defined him. It was a reminder, a point on the map, not the entire journey. One afternoon, almost a year to the day since the flight, Darius found himself once again at an airport gate, this time in Washington, D.C. He was scheduled to speak at a major civil rights conference on the future of public space. As he sat with his coffee, he watched families gather, couples argue over boarding groups, business travelers scroll through emails. The world, for all its wounds, kept moving. A notification blinked on his phone. Your flight is now boarding. First-class passengers only. For a brief moment, he felt the old tension muscle memory, the echo of humiliation and exclusion. But as he walked toward the gate, the attendant met his eyes, smiled genuinely, and greeted him by name. Welcome aboard, Mr. King. Thank you for flying with us. He stepped onto the plane. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of new upholstery. The lead flight attendant, a black woman this time, extended her hand. We've read your story, she said quietly. Thank you for what you did. Darius nodded, surprised by the warmth in her tone, and took his seat at the front of the cabin. He stowed his briefcase, slipped off his jacket, and allowed himself a moment to simply breathe. As passengers filed in, he caught sight of a young boy pausing at the entrance of first class, eyes wide, backpack slung over one shoulder. It was not Miles, but the resemblance was striking the same curiosity, the same hopeful gaze. The boy's mother bent down and whispered encouragement, and he walked to his seat, a few rows behind Darius. During the flight, Darius noticed the boy sketching, his pencil moving fast and light across the page. When the meal service ended, Darius got up to stretch and passed by the boy's seat. Hi there, Darius said gently. What are you drawing? The boy held up a picture of a plane in the sky, with passengers waving from the windows. I want to be a pilot one day, the boy said. My mom says I can go anywhere I want. Darius smiled, feeling the truth of that in his bones. She's right. You can go anywhere, and you belong in every seat on this plane. The boy's mother smiled in gratitude. We've read about you, she whispered. Thank you for making it safer for us. Darius returned to his seat, heart lighter than it had been in months. He gazed out the window as the plane soared above the clouds. For the first time since that day in Charlotte, he felt not just vindicated, but truly at peace. The conference in D.C. was a triumph. Darius spoke about courage, vulnerability, and the unglamorous daily work of change. He reminded the audience that progress is not measured by a single policy or a headline, but by the slow, collective shift in the spaces we share. He spoke about how it is not enough for justice to arrive after harm. It must be built into every interaction, every decision, every place where strangers meet. Afterward, a reporter asked him, "Do you think things are really different now?" Darius paused before answering. Things are never perfect, but every time someone stands up, every time a system changes, every time a child feels welcome, we get a little closer to what is possible. We do not undo what was done to us, but we build a future where fewer people have to carry that weight. That evening, Darius flew home. He sat beside Maya, who had joined him for the weekend, her fingers entwined with his. As the city lights below blinked by, he remembered that first flight how lonely and exposed he had felt. Now, with each mile, he felt more connected than ever. His story had become one voice in a movement, a call to board not just a plane, but a new way of seeing one another. As the plane touched down, Darius glanced once more at the note Miles had given him months before, still folded in his wallet. "Thank you for making me feel proud. I hope I can be like you." He pressed it between his fingers and smiled. The future was boarding, and this time, every seat was open. As Darius King's journey shows us, true courage often starts in the quietest moments. A single act of compassion from a young boy, a decision to record rather than react, and a refusal to accept a half-hearted apology turned a personal humiliation into a force for lasting change. We celebrate the strength of community and stand in solidarity with every person who has ever felt unseen or unworthy. But let us also remember to hold systems accountable. Discrimination in any form is never acceptable. It is our shared responsibility to speak up, to bear witness, and to demand that every passenger, every person, is treated with dignity and respect. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support more voices that challenge injustice and uplift hope. Stay tuned for our next video, because together, we can keep writing the future we deserve.